Many articles and stories have been written about Lynyrd Skynyrd, some true, some questionable, and some plain out unbelievable. But hey, that's part of the legend. Most all the information on Ed King I took directly from his spoken words or confirmed posts on social media. Did Ed tell stories that varied? Yes, he did, just like all the band members did. And those boys didn't have time to write down their history as they were too busy performing, playing, practicing, and partying. Ed King is a member of both Strawberry Alarm Clock and Lynyrd Skynyrd, wrote and played on some of the greatest songs in rock history. Ed has a great story. Let's get right to it. Edward Calhoun King was born September 14, 1949, in Glendale, California. He started playing guitar at 12 with Dick Dale-style surf music, and then really getting into the Beatles. It was around this time he found himself drawn more toward the bass guitar. So besides six-string guitar, Ed would become a very good bass player also. By his mid-teens, in the mid-60s, he was a well-known musician around the local area. He started playing at various military bases, earning some decent money. He ended up joining a group called the Sixpence, which cut some singles on the All-American label in 1966, and then early in 1967, the group gained success locally, and that's when the group evolved into Strawberry Alarm Clock. Ed would end up writing on the music for a song to be called Incense and Peppermint. After the music was sent to some lyricist by the group's manager, the song went on to be a number one for Strawberry Alarm Clock. Although Ed and co-writer Mark Weitz would never see any money from the songwriting royalties, which, as we all know, was a very common occurrence for musicians back then, and it still is today at times. Ed's musical ability was heard all over the album, not only playing lead guitar throughout, but also writing lots of the songs. He toured extensively with the band, playing all over the country and sharing the stage and billings with the Beach Boys, Buffalo Springfield, The Who, and Jimi Hendrix. The group had a lot of ups and downs. They even found out that another group was put together using their name and was out touring under it. Ed and the others took legal action and had it stopped, and decided they would do the touring for a while since they were all broke. While touring, Ed crossed paths with a new and upcoming band called Lynyrd Skynyrd, who opened up a few shows for him. Ed says the Skynyrd only had a couple of original songs at the time, but he really liked what he heard. He says he told the lead singer, Ronnie Van Zant, that they needed to keep writing songs. Ronnie got in touch with Ed a few weeks later and said that they'd written a new song and wanted Ed to hear it. Ed went down to a club called the Comic Book, where the band was rehearsing. He said when he heard the song, it just sent chills down his spine, and he told Ronnie that day if he ever needed another guitar player or a bass player to get a hold of him, as he would really like to work with him. The song Ed King heard that day was called Need All My Friends. If you listen to this song, you feel the roots of Lynyrd Skynyrd starting to take hold. I'm going to leave a link in the description section to a recording of this song. If you've never heard it and are a Skynyrd fan, take my advice, check it out. After hearing this song, I can see why Ed was impressed with the group. It wasn't long before Ed did get a call from Ronnie Van Zant. It seemed their bass player at the time decided to back out of the band after they had secured a recording contract. So Ronnie remembered Ed, called him, and hired him to be the bass player for Lynyrd Skynyrd. Ed says it was hard to fit in, as he didn't feel his bass playing fit in with the style of the music. So he had an awkward time, as he put it, but once in, he took to the long, hot rehearsals at the famed Hell House. Also included in his initiation into the band was, during his first week, he had to spend the nights at the Hell House to keep anyone from stealing their equipment. He said it was hot and a bit noisy from all the alligators. Ronnie Van Zant was the one who hired Ed. He was also the one who took him aside and told him that he could have his say, but that his word was final. It was his way or the highway. Ed says he didn't have a problem with this, but he does go on to say that he really never felt the others in the band wanted him. but he always said to look at the picture of the band in front of Hell House, with him standing on one side of the door and the rest of them on the other. He said that picture pretty much summed up his feelings, him being from California and the rest of the band were Southerners. There is discussions about what bass parts Ed played on the first album. Now here's what it says on the album cover. Ed King, lead guitar on Mississippi Kid, bass on all tracks except Mississippi Kid and Tuesday's Gone. Leon Wilkeson, bass for the group up until the album was cut, rejoined shortly thereafter, composed many of the bass parts played on the album by Ed. Now Ronnie didn't like Ed's bass playing, so he fired him, and the next day Ed says they took it off from practicing and went down to the ice cream factory where Leon Wilkeson was working and talked him into returning to the band, which of course he did, and Ed was moved to play guitar from now on. So at that time, Ed owned an early 70s Les Paul Deluxe and decided if he was going to play guitar in the band, he needed to get a different sound, as Alan Collins and Gary Rossington were both playing Gibsons. Alan had his Firebird and Gary a Les Paul. So Ed took that Les Paul Deluxe and traded it in on a new Fender Stratocaster. This would be the guitar he would write that iconic opening riff to Sweet Home Alabama on, which Ed says was written the first day back at practice with Leon on bass. The story of how the song was written has been told numerous times by Ed and Gary, so I won't go deep into that, but what I do want to say is how this song, and most all the others, were written by great musicians working together. They would bounce chords, riffs, and tunes off each other and come up with some of the greatest songs. Ed refers to their songwriting as someone would come up with a riff and the others would be like vines curling around a branch. Ed also said of the band, they worked harder than anyone. They would get to the Hell House early in the morning and work all day into the night and in the Florida heat and come out exhausted with another great song. Ed would go on to write more great songs with Lynyrd Skynyrd, Working for MCA, Saturday Night Special, Whiskey Rock-a-Roller, just to name a few. I always thought one of his best solos was on a song off the Nothing Fancy album titled Am I Losing? Although in the studio version the solo was kind of buried in the mix to my ears, but it stands out in a live version I heard much better. Ed said he was trying to emulate Toy Caldwell of the Marshall Tucker Band. Ed used that old 64 SG and got some good tone out of it for this song. Really made that middle solo move. Check the song out if you get a chance and see what I mean. Many wonder why Ed King would ever leave the group as he did in May of 1975. For myself, I have my opinion, and I'm sure many of you have yours. These are Ed's words here, and you can come to your own conclusion. You can leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. Here are some of the important facts that Ed has said. I thought the band and everything got real crazy, you know? I don't know, I just had this crazy idea that this was not going to end well. I saw a lot of really evil stuff. I just said, you know, this really can't go on. I'm the hippie from Southern California, and I'm not digging the violence part. The breaking point, Ed said, Ronnie and my guitar roadie who changed my strings were thrown in jail in Ann Arbor. They didn't arrive until 10 minutes before we went on. I had to play on old strings and I broke 2 strings during Freebird. After, Ronnie was riding me and a light bulb just went off and I said, that's it. I went back to my room, packed my stuff up, and left. I always regretted the way I left the band, but I felt I should leave. I kind of felt things wouldn't end well. I never envisioned anything like a plane crash. I just figured someone might die. I could see that happening. Steve Gaines, who would end up taking Ed's place in the band about a year later, would end up dying in the plane crash and was born on the same day and year as Ed, September 14th, 1949. Ed said later on, so that was not lost on me, believe me. Ed King would attend the funeral of Ronnie Van Zant, who also died in the plane crash. I think they had a special bond, even though after Ed left the band, they never spoke again. Ed would reunite with the other remaining members in 1987, 10 years after the crash, and would play with them almost 10 years before stepping down because of congestive heart failure, which would later force him to have a successful heart transplant. Ed would be elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2006 with all the other members of Lynyrd Skynyrd. And this is where I heard him say, "I am really the luckiest guitar player in the world."
I am really the luckiest guitar player in the world. I was really privileged to play with Ronnie Van Zant. My name's Ed King, by the way. I wrote the one great lick, and it was God's gift to me.
As you can hear, he was speaking of being privileged to work with Ronnie and to write the guitar part for Sweet Home Alabama. And maybe it was luck, but as the old saying goes, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And there isn't enough time in this video to get into the preparation Ed went through in his early years. Hours and hours of practicing the bass and guitar, writing songs, and performing with Strawberry Alarm Clock, going back out on the road, living in cockroach-infested band houses trying to make enough money to survive. All of this and more in that time leading up to getting the call from Ronnie Van Zant. Ed King paid his dues for that one opportunity and was ready when that call came in. After that, his talent took over. Ed called it luck because he is just a very humble and down-to-earth guy. I know for a fact there are a lot of guitar players out there today who play Sweet Home Alabama and other Skynyrd favorites the right way because of Ed King. He was very active in social media, especially after the transplant, and he would post and talk for hours about guitars and anything else he wanted to. He would take the time to email people and try to answer all of the questions. He made numerous videos on his guitar and playing, tutorials on many of the Skynyrd classics. He was a frequent visitor to a few other guitar forums, always adding his thoughts on different topics. He had a huge following on Facebook. He had an awesome guitar collection at his house and would take time to show off many of his guitars and talk about them, explaining in detail. He really took the time out for social media. Nobody ran his page for him. He did it himself. He enjoyed sharing with other people. When the post came up on his Facebook page in August of 2018 that Ed had passed, it probably wasn't a shock to the many who followed him. Now, not because he was on there complaining all the time about his health, but because they knew he had been back and forth with the doctors a lot. And he said he was going to take a little time off and take care of his health. Ed kept his positive attitude and sense of humor out there until the end. His guitar collection and some other musical items, as he requested, was taken and sold through Carter Vintage Guitars in Nashville. Ed had set this up before he passed so his family wouldn't have to deal with it. The guitars have been sold now from what I've read. His 59 Les Paul, called Red Eye, was sold to Jason Isbell. Price I saw was $650,000 plus a trade-in. The Stratocaster he wrote Sweet Home Alabama on was said to have sold for $450,000. I'll put up a link here and in the description of a YouTube video of Carter Guitars showing off a few of his guitars for anyone who's interested in seeing them. Ed King was a fantastic guitar player. He was also a very smart musician. After Leon took over the bass duties, Ed fit himself in between Alan Collins and Gary Rossington and made it run like a well-oiled machine on stage. He knew exactly when and what to play to bring it all together. Ed King was a hell of a guy, not just to his family and friends, but to most everyone he met, even on Facebook and forums. I'm betting there's a lot of guitar players out there today whose playing and equipment improved because of Ed taking the time to talk with them and answer their questions. Hope you enjoy this video on Ed King. If you did, I have more videos like this one on the other Skynyrd players I'll put up right here. If you have anything to add about Ed, feel free to do so in the comments section. As always, thanks so much for watching and supporting my channel. Give this video a like and a share, and subscribe on your way out. Or hang out and watch a few more videos. Thanks again for watching.